Welcome to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Gahl Sasson, an authored astrologer with over 2 decades of experience teaching mysticism around the world. We dive into the hidden truths of astrology, the science behind healing, and how ancestral wisdom reveals life's patterns. Gahl also shares how he discovered family constellations and why astrology holds more truth than most people realize. If you've ever questioned the deeper forces at play in your life, this episode's for you. Thank you. Gahl.
I didn't expect that, but let me recover. Yes,
How was that?
it was pretty intense. And it's so funny because I got to family constellation a little bit late in life, I guess, like maybe 2 years ago. And it was always a mystery for me why I can't have wine. Why if I drink red wine, I fall asleep. If I drink white wine, I can't do charts the day after because I get a headache. And the mystery was even more strong because my sister, whom I'm very close to, and she's in Israel, she refuses to have alcohol in the house. If there is alcohol in the house, because her son is a great guy, I'm very good friends with him, he's a DJ, so he buys really good tequila. She puts it in the fridge behind everything in like a box that's kind of locked, almost like in jail. And we all laugh about it, but where it came from. And then one day we had a conversation with our grandmother before she died. She's from Poland and Ukraine. Her mother and father had a pub, Tarvin, in Ukraine. And they used to put water in the wine because there was a rule that you can't sell wine to the peasants because they don't get up to work. So they blamed all the innkeeper and they forced them to stop doing it. But the peasants want to drink. So they had to put wine and water, mix it together, but it's kind of cheating. And then I thought, oh my God, that's our ancestral karma with wine just goes down. We're diluting it with water. And that's when it clicked to me that, yes, there is this ancestral karma that runs through our DNA, through our past lifetimes. I think they're very connected. And that was my mission, to see how it is coming across in charts, which is very, very interesting, because my feeling is that the family constellation it's almost like God sits with you before you're born, and you create this family constellation. The sun is the father, the moon is the mother, your Mercury is your brothers and relatives, and you literally sit there with God, creating what you do in a lot of sessions one-on-one with the little sticks.
Yeah.
And I figure that each one of us does that before we are born, with God, with the entity, with our ancestors, really deciding our chart according to our DNA and past lifetime, which I really believe are all connected.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. I never looked at it before from that perspective. So I think that's such a cool way to look at things. And a lot of people in this work, we all say that we pick our parents right before we got here, right? And it's like the lessons that we have to learn in order to ascend, evolve, get to the next level, whatever you want to call, that, version of the simulation, right? So
I totally agree.
yeah, that's an interesting. I really like how you put that. So tell me a little bit about, I know you do some ancestral charts and with astrology. I'm gonna confess something. I'm a one-trick pony. I know about family constellations, but I don't know much about anything else, right? So I know I was born in June, and I know I'm a Gemini. That's pretty much it.
Well,
So I don't know.
That's one of the reasons why you're communicating right now. Gemini is all about being a bridge builder, a connector. So in your case, you're bridging the people to their families. They somehow, why don't they do it themselves? Well, they need a mediator. They need a connector. You're ruled by Mercury, for example, which is the messenger of the gods. In your case, you're delivering messages with the ancestors, which in some Japanese cultures are the gods, the concept of Shinto. For me, I think that I came to understand more family constellation because of necessity, because I really looked a lot into our family. In that conversation with my grandmother, I think it was very monumental because I was there with my sister. And I also work a lot with names. I'm very fascinated with the names that run in the family, because names we know from the Bible, we know from in Near East and from anthropology, names carry a lot of meaning. There's always meaning to your name. And, oh no, I'm named after my grandmother. Of course, you're named after your grandmother because there is a story, a name that passes down the generation that needs to be purified, purged. The same with genetics, the same with traits. So we're sitting there. My sister's name is Miri, which is basically Maria, Miriam. And my grandmother was telling me, yeah, you're named after my own mother, who was named Maria. And she was not a very nice person. Our grandmother is telling us about her mother. She never touched us. Our Ukrainian maid hugged me and touched me. My mother thought that parents should not touch their kids. So she never touched us. Think about it. Growing up with. So when we go out, my sister is saying, oh my God, it's such a terrible thing. I'm named after this evil woman who never touched her children. And I said, wait. Maria is the mother of God. It's considered to be elevated water in Hebrew. You have purified that idea because you are an amazing mother. My sister is an amazing mother. She's a professor and made amazing kids. My best friends are her kids. You took that name, Maria, and you purified it. Who knows? Maybe you're even Maria from a past lifetime. Maybe you were her, and you got another chance, to work with that genetic material and to fix it. And not only you're much better than our mother, and your daughter is even an amazing mother herself. You really fixed it, and now we don't have to name after any Marias anymore. We've done with it, So I think that that's also something for people to look into. Signs that repeat. You know how you guys do the family tree, which is amazing. You just did it in the meditation. What if you add the signs? Just the signs of each one of them, and try to see if there is a sign that is repetitive. Maybe there's an Aries energy repetitive. And then you just Google, you don't have to be an astrologer, find out what is the characteristic of Aries. Maybe the family is really trying to work with the archetype of Aries, which the key word is, for example, I am, identity. Maybe it's Taurus, which has to do with money. Maybe it's Gemini, which has to do with communication. And once you figure out that, you can see from both sides of your family what signs are more, let's say, missing, which is, okay, why is that sign missing? We're not dealing with something. Or what is sign repeats, and that's some archetype that we need to work with.
Yeah, and that's explains so much about, now I'm seeing it from a completely new perspective because it can almost give the subculture of the family, right? It's that, like, if it's heavily one side influence or the other side influence, and there is something that people that are like, oh, I'm hard-headed, I'm a Taurus or whatever. I don't even know if that's a thing, but I know from the little that I've read is that I was like, oh, I'm hard-headed, and they say the Gemini thing says, like, yeah, that's a lot like my personality. My personality is very, communication. I like to connect people. I'm a connector. I'm a very diplomatic person, and I like to communicate. And that's, put me in a room and I'll talk to everybody. And it just really talks about how, depending on your, birth date, what type of things you take into your family system. And I've always looked at all of these modalities as just an interpretation of a phenomenon that happens in people and social systems, right? Do you see it from a similar perspective? Because sometimes it can take like such mystic and woo-woo like stuff that you're like, this is like an interpretation of a technology that already exists.
Of course. I'm very practical. People ask me, what astrology book are you reading now? And I'm saying news. Because if I really want to understand astrology, I have to look at what's happening as above, so below, how the planet's position is correlating to stories that's happening now. The news of today is basically the history of tomorrow. So definitely that's part of it. And in astrology, we look at families as Cancer. The archetype of Cancer is families. I mean, there's a reason why the great psychologist Jung was an astrologer. And he brought from astrology synchronicities. He brought from astrology the archetypes. And Cancer in astrology is family, of course. But it's at the bottom of your chart. It's called the foundation of your chart. So if you look at the round chart, the bottom of your chart is your family. It's your roots. Everything comes from there. And Cancer is defined as anything you cannot pick up. Astrology is fascinating. I think astrology is a philosophy. What does that mean? You can't pick up your home. Okay, it's Cancer. You can't pick up land. Okay, that's Cancer. You can pick up the mic. Okay, that's Taurus, because you can pick it up. It's a thing that you can pick up. And for me, I took it one level higher because just before you guys, I did a chart here in Istanbul, and she complained about sisters. I said, okay, wait. Family is immovable objects. You cannot move your brother, your sister, your mother. That's it. You have those genes, you have this DNA, you cannot move them. You can work within the range. You cannot talk to her, but you can never stop being your brother or sister. People who
Yeah.
say, I disown my son. That's nonsense. You can't
Oh,
disown your
yeah.
son. That's ridiculous. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about emotionally, but even logically, your genes are there with him.
Yeah.
Everywhere he goes, you're with him.
Yeah.
You guys know it. That's what we just did the meditation. Everywhere you go, my ancestors are there hanging out, you know.
Yeah.
So that's so beautiful about family constellation and why I found it so powerful to work with astrology because it deals with these immovable issues.
Yes.
You know, you can divorce your wife. Okay, that's Libra. Libra is a relationship, but
Oh,
you cannot divorce your son. You cannot divorce your father. You cannot divorce your grandparents.
yeah.
That's it. You're stuck with them. It's immovable. And the
Yeah.
only thing that's left is to heal it, which is precisely family constellation.
Yeah, that's and even when you have kids with your spouse, and even if you divorce, you're still energetically tied to
Connect.
them in some way, connected. And even if you spent a lot of time with somebody, there's an exchange that happens, and they take up, they hold a piece of your soul, and you hold a piece of their
Mhm.
soul. And when there's a strong relationship, that definitely happens. So yeah, I definitely see the correlation between the two worlds. So how did you get into this? Like, what was was this something that you were interested in since you were born, or is this something that you, as you kind of matured, got into this? How did that happen? What was that journey like?
The astrology was kind of funny because I studied psychology
Okay.
and then I was supposed to do my master's and I was supposed to get like a recommendation from this professor that knew me very well because it was very hard to get to know professors personally because I have the scores, I had everything I needed. I just needed his letter of recommendation. And when I came to get it, very sure of myself, he said, I'm not going to give it to you, and I'm going to make sure you're not going to get into the master's degree because you're going to be a problem to the system. I said, what do you mean? He said, either you're going to constantly fight with us because he
Mm.
kind of knew me, or we're going to destroy your creativity. And at that time, I hated him, even though he was a genius. I mean, he was absolutely right, to be honest.
Wow.
I got home so completely depressed and thought, oh my God, my whole world of being a psychotherapist was destroyed. And then I get a phone call, like it always happens. And it's my cancer friend, funny enough, and he's a surfer. And he says, hey, we're going to go to Mexico to surf. Are you coming? I said, what are you talking about coming? I just heard that this terrible news. I'm not going to be getting into my master's, blah, blah. And then in my head, we talked about name. I said, my name, Gahl, in Hebrew means a wave.
Mm.
This guy is suddenly out of the blue asking me to go to Mexico to learn how to surf, basically to learn how to deal with myself. And I was blocked there. Why am I so stubborn? And I said, okay, I'm coming. And I went to Mexico. After 2 weeks of surfing, I went to Guadalajara expecting to fly back. And crazy synchronicities happen. It's too long to explain, but the next thing I know, I'm in Guadalajara. I don't speak Spanish, but I was adopted by a family there. I had a rock band, and the guitar player of the rock band brought me to astrology. And the next thing you know, I'm studying astrology in Spanish, even though I don't speak Spanish. So that was kind of crazy. And I
Wow.
stayed there for 2 years, learning astrology, learning Kabbalah, learning the tarot. And then I decided it's time to go to Los Angeles. And I had a friend there from the army. So I went there. And one thing led to the other, published one book, second book, and here I am.
Wow. Wow. Hi, I'm John. Zulu One is more than just a podcast. It's a mission to bring healing to families and communities. By becoming a supporter on Buzzsprout, you make this mission possible. Click the link in the description and join us. And thank you so much for being here. So, I'm always fascinated by this concept is that, you see things repeat themselves in different things, right? You see in
Patterns.
many of the great religions, you see these patterns, right? And family constellations in so many ways is about pattern recognition. And I think astrology in some way creates those archetypes, right? That they
Mhm.
do create, how you see somebody, and it's like they have these things, and it's like, is it the cosmos having effect on people where they're born and how they exit the world? And do we need these 12 different archetypes, right, to be able to look at things, the 12 apostles, like, why these patterns all emerge in some way? So what are some of the synchronicities and stuff that you've seen that emerge from this framework?
I think that astrology is all about the connection between as above, so below. Whatever is happening up
Mm,
there is happening also below here. Whatever is happening in your family constellation is also happening inside of
yes.
you. That's
Yeah.
as above, so below, as within, so without. It's the same thing. So, for example, you have the moon. The moon comes every 29 days back to where she was before. starting something new. So, for example, in all my books, every year I publish a book on the year ahead. I give the list of the new moon so people can use that instead of being used by it and saying, oh, use the moon in order to start something new every month and work on yourself. So instead of my philosophy with astrology is not like what's going to happen, I'm going to read about my son. It's like, no, this is happening. What do you want to do about it? That's what
Yeah.
I always tell people. Astrology is not about what's going to happen in the future. Astrology traces the patterns and orbits of the planets as they were in the past, getting the understanding of what they mean to keep you like a map, to know where you are, like Google Map, where you are now. And what you want to do is up to you. So my feeling in astrology is that it's the connection or the balance between free will and fate. Fate is your
Mm.
chart. You can't change your chart. You were born at a certain time, at a certain place. That's it. Same thing with your parents. You can't change your parents. That's it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
how is going to be your relationship? Well, that's up to you. Well, she's very nasty to me. Okay, go to therapy, ask her to go to therapy, change your attitude, accept her, and eventually the relationship could improve. So the same thing with the planets. The planets are like the DNA. You
Mm.
can't change it. But your reaction to life, how you accept life, how you work with your range of DNA, or your range with the genes, is basically how you can work with the planets. The best example, because people always battle with it, if my chart is written a certain way, it's like the Sufis say, it's maktub, it's written. It's in Arabic
Oh
maktub,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
written, that's it,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
written.
Yeah.
No, you still have a way to read it. Think about it. You have Shakespeare, Hamlet. We all know that it's destined that Hamlet is certainly, I think it's the third act, will stop and say to be or not to be. We wait for it. But what would be the difference between somebody who gets an Oscar about Hamlet or somebody who's booed out of the stage? It's the same script. It's written. It's the
Yeah.
same DNA. The choices he makes, how he declares, how he talks about it, that's going to make the difference. And that's precisely even what family constellation says. You are stuck with the script of your family, but you can read it differently. You can
Mm.
act it differently. I mean, you guys are literally directors. You put your mother in one place, you put your father in another place. And by the way, I found it very interesting that it sometimes correlates to where the sun and the moon is in the chart. Even the
Oh
way they
really?
face each other, or if the sun and the moon are squaring, meaning that they're not getting along. It's like the father and mother are not looking at each other.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see it, because that's why I think that it's not, he didn't name it family constellation for no reason. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a constellation.
Yeah. 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 I love that. That fact is like, I was having we were doing a family constellation last week, and we were talking about where the name constellations came from. And it's, we are celestial beings, right? And we can look at ourselves as celestial beings, and that our gravitational forces have effect on different members of our family, right? That we're all circling each other in some way, and that may be a closer orbit or a farther away, and there
Mm-hmm.
may be some collisions in that. And to really understand it, that we have gravitational pulls in our system, and that we can adapt to that. And I really liked how you put it. It's like the script is the same, it's how you interpret it, right? And that happens in scripture, right? In biblical texts or in religious texts, it happens like how you interpret it. And the information that's several layers below, and you can read the same book over and over and over again, and then it gets deeper and then deeper and then deeper. And the same thing, I think, with this modality as well, is like you can interpret so much information from this, and we're all uncovering these subconscious patterns, right? And I love the what you said about fate. It's like um like leaving it up to fate is a victim position, right? And being like, how you can adjust, how can you adapt to fate is a victor position, right? That you can say,
Precisely.
I can't move, I can't change the wind, but I can adjust my sails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the beauty of it. We get free will within the context of fate.
Mm,
And instead of arguing, is it only fate? Is it only free will? I mean, why
yeah.
argue so much? It's both. It's like nurture and nature.
Yeah.
What is it? It's both.
Yeah. It's both. Yeah. Yeah. It's both. So what's for somebody that's just beginning to kind of understand this world, or hasn't really had a mind for it, because it's like the back of the newspaper, and I don't mean to minimize it at all, but the horoscope, like, what's your horoscope for this month? It's the blurb, and it's just like very vague. But somebody that wants to take this a little bit more serious, to, like you said, I love the way how you look at it, is that it's like a map of kind of what the future terrain is going to look like, right? It's like, so you can adjust and you can be like, I'm going to be really risky this quarter coming up, or I'm going to take it easy, or you can adjust your risk tolerance, right? So somebody that's getting into this, what would you recommend that to be?
Well, I don't vibe so much with the columns because I think they're very superficial and I think they
Yeah.
don't work so much. And I actually know a few of the people that write to major newspapers, and some of them are clients of mine, and they don't even do so much astrology. They're just very good at writing.
Mm,
So I don't think that that works so much.
okay.
What I do, for example, with my astrology books every year, and that's why they're very thick, is that first part I try to explain certain things about astrologies that I discover, even that I think about during the year. So one way of looking at it is getting books that talk about astrology in general. One book that I really recommend, especially to husbands of wives that like astrology and don't understand what is she doing with that, is Fated Skies. Fated
Faded
Skies,
skies. Okay.
yeah, it's a historian that in Columbia University that says, I'm not going to tell if astrology works or not. I'm just as a historian, look at what historically astrologers have said and what happened after that. Because you can do that.
Yeah.
So, for example, he talks about the British Merlin. I mean, Merlin was British. I don't know why he called him the British Merlin. William Lilly, who's in 13 years before the Great Fire in London, that was 1666, predicted that 80% of London would be burned. He said precisely where. When the fire did happen 13 years later, they arrested him because they thought there's no way he's good have known it unless he started it. And they kept him
Wow.
in jail until they found out that it was some cook who left it in an attic, the stove that burned London. And he then gives another story, which is really funny, about how in the 12th century, the great astrologers, I think from Baghdad, said that there's going to be a crazy storm starting from Mongolia, reaching all the way to Vienna. He specifically said the date of time when it's going to happen. Nothing happened. And everybody was really upset. Either astrology works or this astrologer lost it. Then it turned out to be that Genghis Khan was born at that time in that place. And his grandson went all the way to Vienna, a storm of dust. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So I find it fascinating because I love history, and I don't think
Yeah.
you can study history astrology without loving history. And you see it a lot of time. I tell people, listen, if, for example, there was a client that just reached out to me a few weeks ago and from the fires in LA, and she says, I can't believe it. My house was lost. And you told me that I should look for a new house.
Mm,
I wish I knew that. I mean, I couldn't tell that her house would burn, but in
yeah.
her case, Jupiter moved into the house of home. I said, listen, it's going to be a good time to buy another property someplace else. I didn't tell her it's going to be burned because sometimes life, the one, is way more creative than any astrologer. And
Yeah.
and when people ask me if astrology is a science, I said no, because we cannot prove it scientifically, but it's a poem. It's a
Mm,
poetry, basically. And
yeah.
poetry can be interpreted, like you said, with a revelation in many different ways, different layers, but it is a poetic study. So I think that working with astrology, nowadays you have a lot of these apps that you can download and it gives you interpretation. So working with that, I don't think you can do it through the columns, you know.
Yeah.
And I happen to be coming to Miami to teach a class on the astrology of 2025. But whenever I talk about 2025, like in the book, I try to give it a context of history, of the past, or people understand that it's not about prediction. For example, in my book of 2020, I said, listen, guys, the patterns that we have in 2020 are similar to 1983, 84, where there was a recession and the AIDS pandemic happened. And I even said that WHO was created. I didn't know that there's going to be another pandemic, but I said, this is a pattern that repeats itself. So we're going to have some kind of, I didn't know that people are going to be locked up in homes, but if you look at history, you can see patterns that repeat. So same thing for 2025. We have certain patterns that repeat from the past. And that's why I call this year the year of shedding and pain and suffering. I didn't know that we're going to be burned right in the beginning. In Turkey, people
Yeah.
burned. In LA, people burned. I mean, look at what's happening around the world. There's so much suffering, so much
Yeah.
confusion. That's part of the year. So we can see that through patterns.
Yeah. That's such a good way to put it. I love the, in Constellations we talk about, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it often rhymes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
The
very similar
poem.
to that, right? It's
Yeah.
like a poem, right? And you say, hey, maybe the mom was abusive, right? and then your son marries an abusive woman, or your son becomes abusive, and it's like skips your generation, but you're, because that's still entangled in some way in the family system, that somebody that you're in a relationship is either abusive or abused, right? That abuse repeats itself in the pattern. It's not
Mhm.
exactly like the woman was abusing the man or whatever that looks like, or their children, or whatever, but it does rhyme in so many ways. And I love that kind of interpretation of it. It's like you can say, hey, it's not going to tell you exactly what's going to happen, because that would be predicting the future, right? But you can give, some signs and things to be aware of what's going to happen. And so, yeah, I love that perspective on it. And so, like, if people, what do you say that people that are relatively skeptical about astrology, is that, I know that you just talked about that book, and I'm like, oh, that for me resonates a lot. And I'm not skeptical, I'm agnostic. If Sophie, right, our friend Sophie says, she's like, hey, this is what's going on, this is what you got to be careful with, and I'm like, okay, I'll be careful. Like, I'll listen. I don't have, she's guided me so well in other things in my life, that this is another thing that I just listened to, right? So if somebody's relatively skeptical, what would you say?
I think that the most important thing is to see if this is a technology that works. The
Mm.
same way that there's a lot of people that are skeptical about, what do you mean that this person represents somebody that I know? How does that work? This field,
Yeah.
this knowing field, I don't get it. So
Yeah.
I read books about it and how quantum technology. I mean, there's maybe quantum entanglement, etc. Maybe,
Yeah.
but my feeling is this. First of all, as Jung described it, astrology is a symbolic system of oneness, meaning that it's trying to take the one and give you tools to understand the one, because everything is part of the one. I
Yeah.
believe wholly that everything is connected, that if we go back in time, even 13.8 billion years ago, we get to the Big Bang, where everybody were together in this infinitely small, infinitely hot, and then it expanded and all of us cooled in a different way, but we're all from that same place. So even mystics agree. So astrology is trying to understand our environment, our celestial environment. And for me, with skeptics, I always say test it.
Yeah.
You have, like, for example, March is going to be a very intense time. March is going to be intense because we're going to have a planet called Venus going retrograde. We have Mercury is also going to be retrograde. There's eclipses. Check to see what it is. For example, like 4 or 5 months ago, because I'm from Israel, I'm very involved in what happened with the hostages and what's happening with the terrible situation in Gaza. So I told people in March or even before, hey guys, and I put it on Instagram so I can show it to people. When Mars is retrograde, I think there is a chance in Cancer, there's a chance that the hostages will come back and that there will be ceasefire in Gaza so that the Gazan can come back to their homes. Because Mars retrograde, going back, Mars is the soldier in Cancer, home and family. Mars hates being in Cancer. Mars doesn't want to be at home. He wants to be in the battlefield. So I called him the fallen soldier. And then I thought, wait, fallen soldiers, hostages, I think they're going to come back then. And it was after a year plus that people are saying it's going to come soon, going to come soon. In May, they said there's going to be a deal. In September, they say going to be a deal. And in January 5 or 6, Mars started going retrograde in Cancer. And a week after, they started coming back. And hopefully, they're still coming back. And now the people are coming back to Gaza as well. So you can
Wow.
see these kind of things happening. It's just us being able to interpret the signs. The signs are there. The same way that the family is there, but a good practitioner
Yeah.
can fix the family, can
Yeah.
make the representation work. So with skepticism, I think that everybody needs a certain amount of skepticism. I would call skepticism the little f. When I studied physics, little f, if you remember, it's friction. And the reason
Mm.
why there is friction, so I'm doing like this, I'm getting excited. If there was no friction to my chair, whoop, I would
Yeah.
be flying into your computer. So friction is necessary. I mean, yes, the chair is heavy, so I have to move it now. It's annoying. But without that, I'll be flying all over the place. Skepticism is important. Without skepticism, there's no healing.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I really like how you put it, and I really like your practical approach to this technology. Right? It's like as another interpretation system and another technology. It's like it really grounds it in. I think an audience that hasn't really been exposed to this, right? Because I remember growing up, it's like it would be like 11:30 at night, and TV would be go on, and some some person with like very flamboyant, and be like, oh, the future is going to look like, and I grew up in Venezuela, so it'd be
Okay.
like 11:45 at night, and you'd have like this guy that is predicting the future, and like, okay, but this is such a nuanced take on it, and it's so practical that it really, really resonates with that side of me.
In my book, Cosmic Navigator, the first book I wrote on astrology, I mentioned that there is no proof to astrology. It's like maybe shooting myself in the leg. There is no proof. Anybody who says proof, it's nonsense. There is no proof, except the proof that works for me, which I believe in, is the proof of evolution. What does that mean? Astrology started in Babylon a long time ago, in Sumeria, sorry. And then in Babylon, it was really developed. Then the Greek took it and made it even bigger, okay? Astrology has never been part of the mainstream. It's not like the Pope that forced everybody to convert to Christianity, or Islam that conquered ground and make everybody. It never was in the mainstream. So people didn't have to do it. And you had a Babylonian astrologer telling the king, don't attack now, attack in 2 days and attack from this side. If it didn't work for that king, the astrology would have died and the knowledge with him. So the reason why astrology is here is because over the year, it survived and corrected itself, like AI. Every time you get that hallucination from AI, you try to correct it so it doesn't do that same answer again. Same thing with astrology. You told me Mars in Aries is this. It's not true. Okay, I'm correcting it. Don't kill me. And that's how it evolved, because it worked. And that's why people risk themselves in order to work with astrological. A lot of time it was against the mainstream, So I always tell people the only proof that worked for astrology is because it actually worked. I know it from myself. People come every 6 months or a year because what I told them helped them and made sense to them and avoided problems for them. And one of the other proofs that I have for astrology, which I think is the birth of astrology, is if you think about it, a long time ago when we just started walking on two, the pelvis changed, women had to give birth. It was much harder. A lot of women died giving birth at that time. And it was very dangerous to have sex with the caveman because you can get pregnant and kill yourself and die. So a clever woman, I'm sure it was a woman, had to figure out that there is a cosmic clock out there. And according to the moon, she can decide when to have sex with the caveman and not get pregnant. And that's when astrology was born, because the woman connected the moon to her cycle. And then she probably told her friends.
Yeah.
That's the birth of astrology. So the birth of astrology came out of the need of women to survive pregnancy.
So it's almost a symbiotic relationship with ebbs and flows of the cosmos.
Precisely. It's linking yourself and syncing to, because like you said, we're stardust. That's what we are. We're made of stardust. That's our material here, stardust.
Yeah.
So of course the stars that are made of stardust and we are part of it are connected. We just have to figure out the language.
Yeah, and there's always been mystics, right? There's always been like the Sufism or Kabbalah or the Merlin. There's always been these mystics that have been able to interpret, the shells or the whatever the chicken bones or whatever the thing is that interpreting, the ebb and flow. And like I said a little bit ago, is like the ebb and flow of the cosmos is like how to understand and how to, in some way, in constellations, time and place are irrelevant, right? Like you're interpreting a different, like the connected morphic field or whatever, and that you can use this technology to do the same thing, right? To look at it from a different perspective, and it may be the same effect that's happening that as facilitators we do in the field, right, in the family system, but in a much larger, grander scale that can have the patterns of what the next eras are going to look like and the next time lapses are going to look like. So this conversation has really sparked my interest in this, because I've traditionally, I'm going to be very transparent. Like I traditionally didn't have I don't know, it's like, it was very, yeah, sure, that this is what I am, but this is like a renewed perspective on what that does, just looking at it as another technology and very practical,
for example, Pluto, the Lord of Death and Transformation. Okay, Pluto represents, in the family constellation of the zodiac, death and transformation. Pluto, Hades, the underworld, but Pluto also means riches. And it moved once in 250 years into Aquarius. And it just happened now in November of last year. But it was on and off because it's a slow planet from 2023. Anyway, I looked to see what happened last time Pluto was in Aquarius. And lo and behold, it was the French Revolution. And Aquarius is all about freedom, equality. So the last time Pluto was there, Aquarius is also about technology. It was the Industrial Revolution. Aquarius is all about democracy. The American Constitution was written. And what is the first word? We the people. That's precisely Aquarius. That's why I could tell that next time Pluto is coming to Aquarius, which is now, AI will be very important because that's technology. Democracy will be reevaluated, and look at what's happening around the world.
Yeah.
Democracy is almost like having an autoimmune disorder.
Yeah.
Democracy eating itself in a sense,
Yeah.
because democracy was very good against dictators, against fascism, against monarchs, but it can't be good against itself. So Pluto in Aquarius is kind of like messing around with that archetype of democracy and government and technology innovation. And that's for the next 20 years. But we know what's going to happen in the future based on what happened in the past. And that's what I kept warning, even in my book last year, Israel, because I went back 250 years, 250 years, 250 years, 250. And then I saw that many, many times ago when Pluto was in Aquarius, it's when the Roman destroyed the temple in Israel. It wasn't even the Romans, it was the Jews that burned it, but never mind. It was the destruction of the second temple. And that's why I warned people that, listen, you have to really be careful about what's going on with the Middle East, because last time it happened, the whole project was destroyed. Yeah. So be careful. Okay, it's not inevitable. You still have free will. You still can listen to the signs. It's the same thing. For example, every time you have a birthday, you have what is called the solar return. The sun returns back to the place it was when you were born. That's your birthday. It's a very difficult time. It's not a happy time. It's a difficult time, regardless of your age. Don't tell me because you get older. Even kids in their birthday get disappointed, and they get wrapped up about what you brought, what you didn't bring me, blah, blah, blah. It's a tough day. That's why we celebrate birthday, because the old ancestors, our ancestors realized, okay, every time there's a birthday, it's really tough. Let's celebrate it. Let's give them gift. Let them treat them special because it's such a hard day. That's how it works.
Wow. Well, that's such a cool perspective. That's that brings a lot up for me. Just like to kind of to understand a whole different level of what we are. And one of the things I wanted to ask you as this comes up is that I have this thought is like the more that we work on ourselves, the more that we work on ourselves, the more effects that we'll have on our family, and that more the family will have effect on social structure, right? And then countries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see this as, do you see using this technology and the interpretation of this technology as a way that we could say, hey, there's going to be a tough time to come up, focus on healing during this next time, or this is going to be an optimal time to rebuild, and this is going to be an optimal time to like evaluate this social contract, or focus on technology, and that you could actually govern your life with this kind of compass?
Yeah, because I think that's what the planets are. They're like markers of time. With the Zeitgeist, the idea of Zeitgeist in German is basically the spirit of the time. So yeah, there is, let's say, one client that I can tell them, listen, your North Node, whatever, is in your house of relationship. I want you to focus on relationship, less about yourself. Don't be so self-centered. Be another person. I could say, listen, your North Node now is marking that you need to focus on your relationship, not on yourself, or on yourself and not in relationship, or your career, because things are shifting and changing. So that's the beautiful thing about the chart. You have your chart that you're born with, but the planets are continuing to move, and they're continuing to tell stories, and they move around your chart. And that's why things are changing. People tell me, I recently meet a lot of cancers. Well, probably in your chart, there is a house, an area in your life ruled by Cancer, and that house is now beaming. Maybe it's the house of career, and all these cancers are trying to shine the career in you. And that's why I said to you in the beginning, I really think that astrology is a system of psychology, philosophy, because the premise of astrology is really beautiful. It says there is 12 drawers, 12 files, and you have to take everything in life and decide each one of them, which will they fit in which drawer. So, for example, like I said, astrology is ruled by Aquarius. Aquarius is also the future. Aquarius is technology. Aquarius is community. Aquarius is altruism. And Aquarius is humanity. So according to astrology, humanity is altruistic. And then when we hear that there is a lot of research that shows that altruism is actually in our DNA because it helps us, Or for example, Gemini. Gemini is communication, but it's also siblings.
Mm.
Of course, because if you have siblings, you really learn to communicate with them.
Yeah.
Because parents is this kind of communication, siblings is more this kind of communication. But it's also roommates. Oh, well, if you have a roommate, it's like a brother and a sister, because your brother and sister might have been in the same room with you, you know? So it's really beautiful how, like we said, even Cancer is immovable object, land, but also families.
Mm.
So that's why it forces you to kind of look at life with these 12 colors and different frequencies, and to really understand life through that lens. That's why I call it a system of philosophy.
Yeah, I like that. My sister's a Gemini as well, so it's like, and I'm 2 years older, and she, like, to the date, like 23, like 23
Um,
months and like 3 weeks. We're almost, we're a week apart, and we're very similar, in our temperament and how we. So that's a really
yeah,
cool way
she's like
to.
your twin.
Yeah, she's like my twin, exactly. She's a twin that's 2 years younger than I am. Yeah. So how did you come across family constellations, and what was the first impressions?
Well, I was in Bulgaria, which I'm going in 2 days, and we're doing some workshops there as well. And I met a very good friend that actually brought me to Bulgaria to begin with. I met her in Istanbul, and my brother is from Bulgaria. So I saw her sitting with my father, who came to visit me, and talking to her in Bulgarian. The next thing I know, she took my book on Kabbalah and translated it there. Elitsa Velikova, she's called. And we became really, really good friends. She's also an Aries. I'm an Aries, so we came like twins in our way. And then she got really into family constellation a while ago. She studied it
Okay.
for a while after being a therapist for a while. And then we thought it would be fun, after so many years of knowing each other, actually 19 years of knowing each other, to maybe do some workshops together. And I didn't know how. So she gave me a bunch of books to read about family constellation, and I got really into it. And I started reading a lot about ancestral karma, because it suddenly brought a lot of truth to me. I can't
Mm.
pretend. It's not like research. Okay, now I have to read about it. It's like I'm getting really sucked into it, and I read amazing books about it. Usually, a good book means that I can cry, not because it's sad, but because it touches me,
Yeah.
in a certain
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and causes me to have a physical reaction. And a lot of these books made it. And then when I'm reading these books, because I have that ideas of astrology, I can immediately see how astrology works with it. Oops. He says a
Ah.
pattern that happens every 30 years. Saturn takes 29 and a half years to go around the sun. It's a Saturn issue. Oops. He had it at the age of 19. 19 is the nodal return. Da, da, da. So even between reading the books about family constellation, I realized how much astrology is inside. So we started doing these workshops where there is working on representation of the sun and the moon instead of father and mother, because sometimes people are too attached emotionally to the son, to the father and mother, but we can
Yeah.
kind of bypass it through, no, we're talking about your sun and your moon. Your moon is here, your sun is there. Okay, now when we get deeper into it, we get more involved into the energy of your father and mother. Or we start talking about Mars and Venus in order to understand patterns in constellation that have to do with your relationship, you know?
Okay.
So that's how I got into it. And yeah, that's what we're going in 2 days in Plovdiv and in Sofia. We're doing a workshop on Saturn, which is fear, trying to get that fear energy with family constellation, maybe to
Okay.
find a representative of your Saturn, of what you're afraid of, what you really are scared of. Um, and we're experimenting, because people are very open in Bulgaria and maybe in Sofia, because it's called the city of wisdom. And we bring that from there. We started spreading it. We did some workshops in Chicago as well last year. But it's fascinating to see the combination, because I tried to Google online first to see, okay, who's doing family constellation in astrology? Maybe I can check to see. I couldn't find anything. So I
No,
decided,
yeah.
okay, we have to develop it slowly.
That's such a cool aspect of it. It's like family constellations come in many shapes and sizes, right? There's shamanic, and with horses, and structural constellations, systemic constellations, and I think I never thought of it, and I'm like, this makes all the sense in the world now that and your explanation is so good that, and you have such a profound grasp of the concepts, and I think, being a military veteran, yourself, and I'm a veteran myself. So, just the practicality of coming to spirituality from a practical masculine sense is I think it's such a gift, So, And putting this together, I'm just fascinated by this, and I want to read your books, and I want to really learn more about this. When are you coming to South Florida?
I'm coming there on the 14th on Valentine's. It's very symbolic. My first time in Miami in Valentine's. I guess I
Okay.
had my Valentine's in Miami in a past lifetime.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be teaching with the Miami Life Center. It's a yoga
Okay.
place. So we're going to do on the 15th about astrology. And on the
Okay.
16th, we're going to do a past lifetime regression because I work a lot with past lifetimes. I find it
Oh,
fascinating.
really?
So
So,
we're
and
going to
that's
do a
going to be
talk
on the
about it.
16th?
The 16th, yeah.
Okay. And and how long are you going to be in South Florida for?
14 to 17.
Okay.
And then
All right.
back
Beautiful.
to LA because I was just now in Dubai, and before that I was in London and in Milano. So I travel a lot. I have
Wow.
Sagittarius in the house of career, which means traveling.
And so if people wanted to get a hold of you, if they wanted to follow you on this journey, and I would imagine that you have a pretty active Instagram, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, cosmic_navigator is my
Okay.
Instagram, and cosmicnavigator.com is my website, and they have everything there. There's a lot of free things on my website because I believe astrology, again, is Aquarius. Aquarius is internet, and Aquarius is freedom. So I believe that on your website, you should have free things for people. So they can check out the things, and I'm going to do some readings, like private readings there
All right.
while I'm there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Gahl, I hope this is good, the first of many conversations on
I hope so.
constellations and astrology. I'm really excited about what this future is going to look like. It's really, really beautiful. I know. So Sophie was like, "You need to talk to Gahl." I'm like, "All right." So, we had this conversation, and I'm so glad we did, because it's fascinating. My mind's like, my mind's going a million miles an hour. So I'm going to definitely follow you, and I'm very excited about what the future holds.
Well, thanks a lot. And thanks for giving us this beautiful platform. And, John, the meaning of name John is actually from Hebrew, Yohanan. And it means God's mercy or God's compassion, which is interesting because I'm just thinking about it now. Sorry. Is that Cancer is associated with St. John because Cancer is the first water sign. And what was John? He was the Baptist. I baptize you with water. The one after me, the true one, will baptize you with fire, etc. So the first day of Cancer, which is the solstice, is the day of baptism. And your job is to focus on family Cancer constellation, even though your Gemini belonged to the sign before, because the solstice is right between Gemini and Cancer. That's the borderline between I think, which is Gemini, to I feel, which is water. So it's interesting that you were called John. Again, I believe you named yourself and just whispered it to your mother.
Yeah, my second name is Andrew, Andres. It's in Spanish, so it's
Andrew
John
is
Andres.
Andres is the human. So it's also fascinating because you need to remind yourself that you're human, that you're not alien, that you're not an angel, you're not a spirit, you're a human. So remember, baptizing humans. And Acosta is to the shore, to
the coast. Yeah.
Well, I rest my case. You're not baptizing in rivers. You prefer to baptize people in the sea.
In the ocean, yeah. That's
Ándale a
beautiful.
la costa. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Gahl, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thanks a lot.
I can't wait for our next conversation, man. Hopefully we can do a lot more of these. So I'm fascinated by your journey and how you developed this.
And of course, you're a guest. If you want to come to any of the classes or anything, you're more than welcome. Just let me know.
Yeah, I'd love to, and I'd love to connect while here in Miami. So I'll come see you and take you out to lunch, and we'll connect.
Totally.
I love that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zulu One podcast. If you found value in today's podcast, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything to us, and thank you for being part of this journey.